Okay, our Old Testament story this morning comes from the book of Genesis, chapter 9. It starts with the 8th verse, and it goes like this. God said to Noah and to his sons with him, I am now setting up my covenant with you, with your descendants, and with every living being with you, with the birds, with the large animals, and with all the animals of the earth, leaving the ark with you. I will set up my covenant with you so that never again will all life be cut off by floodwaters. There will never again be a flood to destroy the earth. God said, this is the symbol of the covenant that I am drawing up between me and you and every living thing with you on behalf of every future generation. I have placed my bow in the clouds. It will be the symbol of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth and the bow appears in the clouds, I will remember the covenant between me and you and every living being among all the creatures. Floodwaters will never again destroy all creatures. The bow will be in the clouds, and upon seeing it, I will remember the enduring covenant between God and every living thing of all the earth. God said to Noah, this is the symbol of the covenant that I have set up between me and all creatures on earth. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So for the next several weeks, we're going to be talking about promises. Promises that are in the Bible, promises that have been made over the course of the history of the Bible. The word used in this passage is covenant. Covenant is a fancy word for a contract, essentially. Covenants in the ancient Near East, when this story was told, were set up usually between a higher power and a lesser power. It was a way of the higher power saying, if you do this, then I promise to do this. So often when a kingdom invaded a country, they would set up a covenant with the people there. If you promise to, do what I tell you to, I promise not to kill you. Was essentially the basics of every covenant in the Bible. Before the Bible, every covenant in the ancient Near East at the time. Today we hear the story of the first promise in the Bible. It's the first promise in the Bible, and it comes just after Adam and Eve. So we have the creation of the world, we have Adam and Eve, we have Adam and Eve messing up and getting kicked out of the garden, and then several generations later comes Noah. By this point in the story, Noah has become the only righteous person in his town. He's the only person who is doing what he's supposed to be doing according to the rules of God. And so God decides that the best thing to do is unplug the computer. Have you ever gotten to a point where your computer is so bad, it's so messed up, it's not working, there's nothing you can do about it, you've debugged it, you've emptied the trash can, you've done all the things, and eventually you just have to unplug it? This is what God's decided the earth has become. The computer that's so buggy, there's no fixing. And so God essentially unplugs the computer, decides to start over, except for the one family. The one family that is doing the things it's supposed to be doing. The one family that are following the rules that God had set up in the beginning of time. Now, it's important at this point to point out a few things about this story. The first part of the story that we should remember is that this part of the Bible is called prehistory. These stories come before the invention of written writing. There was nobody sitting during the flood writing down the history of the flood minute by minute, okay? There was not a stenographer like day 1, raining 3.5 inches. Day 2, raining 7 inches. Day 3, raining 9.5 feet. There was nobody doing that, okay? This story comes from before we had the ability to write, before alphabets were invented. And the reason we know this story comes from before those times is that every civilization in the ancient Near East has the same story. Every civilization in the ancient Near East has a story about a flood that wiped out all of civilization. All of them, every single one. In fact, if you went to college, the first thing that you're handed in a philosophy class is a story called the Epic of Gilgamesh. If you have read the Epic of Gilgamesh, it is the same story as the flood story. It's exactly the same, except for they call God Gilgamesh. Exactly the same. So just because it comes before written history does not mean it's not true. It just means that it's telling us a different thing. It's not worried about facts so much. It's telling us about something, telling us what we should take away from the story of God. Does that make sense? Are you with me so far? So this story, while not necessarily factually true, is in essence absolutely true. We know at some point there was a flood. It was a bad enough flood that it destroyed civilizations across the ancient Near East. Egypt to Greece to Mesopotamia, all the way over to Iran. It's a bad enough flood that it wipes out all of civilization. It's a bad enough flood that they remembered it 5,000 years later. This is the story they're telling their children over and over and over again. Remember that time? Remember the time when we were so misbehaved, we were so distrustful that God decided to pull the plug and start over. Do you remember that time? Do you also remember the time that God decided that we weren't beyond redemption and allowed Noah and his family to live? Now, Noah and his family have been on the ark for a long time. They've been on the ark for 40 days and 40 nights, which is Bible speak for a long time. They're on the ark. They're stuck on the ark with animals. Now, depending on which flood story you read in the Bible, because there's two, one of them has them with two animals coming two by two. We all learned that song, right? God said to Noah, you got to build an arky, right? And they all come in by two and two. The second flood story has 2 by 2 of the unclean animals and 7 of the clean animals. So who knows exactly how many animals were on the ark, but it was a lot. Except for the fish, which for some reason got to swim, I guess. Birds, giraffes, rhinoceroses, all the animals are on the ark together. Noah and his family are stuck on the ark with all these animals for a long time, when eventually the ark hits dry land. It's still several weeks before they can leave the ark, but when they do, they step out onto dry land. Can you imagine that moment? That moment where everything was hopeless, where you weren't really sure how long this was going to last, where you didn't know how much longer the giraffe was going to keep arguing with the rhinoceros. You don't know how many times you're going to have to say, be quiet, or I'm turning this ark around. How many times you're going to have to say, put your seatbelt back on, we're not there yet. How many rounds of 99 bottles of beer on the wall you've sung. If it's been on the church bus, it's probably 9,000 times, because every time we go on a trip, the first thing they do is sing 99 bottles, right? They step out onto dry land. And there it is. Hope. There it is, possibilities. There it is, the reminder that though God decided to reboot everything, all was never lost. All was never hopeless. It was just a time of reimagining. Now, what's interesting about this covenant to me is that God is not restricting the behavior of the people at all. God in no way blames the people for this flood. God doesn't say to Noah, by the way, here's the 9 things you now have to do in order for me to continue to be nice to you. Or, now that you're on dry land, here's what you need to do to continue to be righteous. God in no way expects anything from Noah at all. Not a thing. The only person restricted in this covenant is God. The only person in this covenant who has anything to do that might hold them back, any promise that they have to change their behavior, the only person in this story who is wrong is God. God put the rainbow in the clouds to remind him not to do that again. This is a quote that God put on his mirror that says, hey, remember when you messed up last time? Don't do that. It was bad. This covenant restricts God and only God. So what do we do with that? Now, if you grew up like I did, the main theme song for our church was Immortal, Invisible, God Only Wise, right? where we get this picture of God who is everything, right? Omnipresent, omnipotent, whatever the other one I can't remember right now is, right? The three omnis, we were all taught that as children. That is not the picture of God that Genesis has. That picture of God comes from Aristotle. Aristotle is the one who said that God was an unmovable mover, that God sat in heaven and just sort of played chess with all of us, that God was capricious and mean and angry and did whatever God wanted us to do. Genesis shows us a God who is deeply moved in his heart. Genesis shows us a God who cares about his people, who is invested in his people, who cries and weeps, and who changes his mind. Genesis shows us a God who is not distant or far away and removed in the clouds, or unchangeable or unmoved from what we ask of God. Genesis reminds us that God is just as prone to anger and hurt as we are, except God made a promise. God made a promise to us and to the world that he wouldn't do that again, that he wouldn't cause harm and pain to us again, that though there may be times when God's heart is hurt by what we do, there may be times when God wonders in the mirror and says, "What are they thinking?" Where God wonders why their kids have grown up the way they did. Didn't I teach you better than that? Though those moments may come for God, God made a promise to never react out of that emotion, to never let the anger rule, but instead to always treat us with love and grace and mercy. We try to change other people all the time. It's probably one of our favorite pastimes. We sit around and try to tell other people how to live their lives. Jeremy will come home from school with a problem from school, right? This happened in school today, and I am so quick to have 9 possible answers for how they should have done it differently. Oh, that's the problem? Well, maybe they should have done this, right? What they really should be doing is this and this and this, right? Oh, that kid asked that way? Well, maybe he should have done this and this and this, right? I'm so good at telling other people how to live their lives. My children are going through a phase now where everything that their sibling does is wrong. You know that phase of childhood? We got in a fight the other day because one child promised the other child they would play with them, right? I promise I will play with you if you play with me first, which is the classic gotcha trap. Never promise someone, never listen to a promise where you have to do the thing first, right? I promise I will jump on the trampoline with you if you play this game with me first, right? Classic trap. Because what happened? They played the first thing and never got to the second thing, right? Which means I had a crying child in my kitchen. But he promised. Oops, I gave it away. But there was a promise, right? They promised. And I told him he didn't listen. And he promised me he would do this. And all of this stuff about how that person should have changed and be different, and how their personality should just be different, and they should be more like me, right? And I said to her, you cannot change other people's behavior. You cannot make people behave the way you want them to. You can't force people to be kind. You cannot force people to be good people. You cannot force someone else to behave the way that you expect them to behave. The only person you have control of is who? Me. The only person I have control of is me. And I can spend all day wishing they were different. I can spend all day hoping that they'll change. I can spend all day stepping over and over into a trap and then get mad when the trap springs. But who is at fault when I step into the trap again? Me. And it turns out, if we change our behavior, other people change their behavior too. If we stop stepping into the trap, this trap stops existing. If we stop existing in a cycle over and over again that is harmful and dangerous and hurtful, then we stop that cycle from happening. And the only person who can do that is us. The other person's never going to do it. Other person is never going to change unless we change ourselves. I think that's what God realized in that silent moment during the flood. These people are never going to change as long as I'm angry. These people are never going to change as long as I punish them with floods. These people are never going to change as long as I am relating to them in the same way every time. And so I am going to change. And I'm going to put a rainbow in the clouds to remember that. And so we have a God of mercy, and a God of grace, and a God of possibilities, because God made a mistake and then fixed it 20,000 years ago. And God has kept that promise. Thanks be to God for that. Amen.